How's it going, class? The TED Talk that I'm discussing was written by Martin Villanueva and is titled How I Made an Impossible Film. This TED Talk basically explains how Martin took his dream. He had very little money, he had to ask a lot of people for help. Didn't know if they were going to help him or not, but as you can tell, the movie was made and everybody helped him. And he did it for little to no money. It shows that it took 7 years to produce a film that normally would take about $25 million for any studio to make, while Martin did it for a little over two. This TED Talk also shows you how a dream can turn into reality. One of the punch methods that Martin uses is challenge. He was challenged throughout the entirety of this film. From the challenge to get the movie done on such slim budget, from the challenge to ask the general manager of Cirque du Soleil to make musical instruments for an important scene of the movie, and he actually did it for free. And you never knew if he was going to say yes or no. He just asked him, and the guy said yes. And he also asked his mentor, who's the guy that actually encouraged him to make this movie. He actually got him into the movie for free. It was a challenge in itself just to get him to the studio to read the lines, record his head because he couldn't physically be in the movie. That was a challenge there. It was a challenge to find staff that was willing to work for little to nothing. And as payment for his staff working, he actually encouraged them to dream and think of different ideas so he can incorporate those into the movie to kind of enhance it a little bit. Martin also used the personal method by telling his audience how he used to read comic books as a kid, and how he used to dream about what the future would look like, and that's kind of how the book came upon being developed. That's how the movie was written, and that's how the movie was produced and eventually finished. So basically, the comic book turned into a dream, the dream turned into a book, the book turned into a movie. And Martin's mentor, who was Robert, the guy who actually appeared in the movie, was telling him that the only way that you can make a movie on such short budget was you have to write it, you have to produce it, and you have to star in it, and you have to do all that so you don't have to pay somebody else to do that for you. And the only way that you can possibly make that happen is to do that. He also told Martin when he hires his staff to make sure that they're not focused on money, because he wants them to be able to dream. Like I said, encourage them to think about how ways to improve the movie. He'll incorporate that into the movie, and that will enhance his movie on his audience. And you can show it by, if you want to watch the movie, I'll tell you what the title of the movie is towards the end of my presentation. The two punch methods that Martin used instantly connected him to his audience, especially those who have ever dreamed about what the future would look like, or anybody who's ever read a comic book, or anybody who's had to get something done on such short budget and make it just as good or better than if you had a full budget to work with. Martin actually used green screens to cut costs with not having to go to different film locations to film. A green screen basically puts you in a background without actually having to be there. So you can, the way Martin used green screens in this movie was he took Robert, filmed him in the studio reading lines, and basically cut his head off, put it on somebody else's body, and that's how Robert was incorporated into the movie. It was just his head on somebody else's body, using a green screen and lines that he wrote that Martin wrote for him and that he read in the studio, and he did this for free. The movie was titled Mars on Avril. Avril. I don't even know how to pronounce the movie because he just says it in his presentation. But Martin also showed clips of his movie during the presentation, which was good because he shows how he incorporated Robert into the movie, how he was able to use the green screens to cut costs, and how he was able to do this whole project. The movie costs about $2.3 million to make, and if this was made in America by any American studio, it would cost about $25 million minimum. Martin also explains time was the reason he was actually able to make the movie for so cheap, because the movie took 7 years to make. So it takes time to make a movie on such short budget and to make it come out right, because you have to edit it. It's a lot of editing, it's a tedious process. But if you have time on your side, if you're not rushed by a studio to get a product out so they can get their money back, then you're in a good situation. He also explains you got to have love, passion, dedication. You got to have patience to make a project go from a book. I mean, it probably took a couple years to write the book, then 7 more years. So it could have probably took a decade to get this whole project from start to finish. So that's dedication, passion, love. It's everything. And the guy who I'm talking about, Robert, that's Martin's mentor. He's the guy that encouraged him to take this book, take it into a movie, and he encouraged him that if you can make this movie for on a such short budget, you'll get a lot of money for it, which is will enable you to write more books, enable you to turn more books into movies, and kind of start your career off. Martin explains how to turn a book into a movie, how to write scenes. It was a whole process, and Robert's schedule is booked until 2024. Like I said earlier in the presentation, Robert's schedule is booked. So the only way he was actually able to be in the movie was he came out of the studio. He had a camera on him. He read scenes, had facial expressions. It's the only and they photoshopped his neck off, and it was on somebody else's body with his head. And that was one of the weird aspects of the movie, where he was actually able to be in the movie for free and not actually have to act in any scenes. Because they photoshopped his head on somebody else's body. And this was a big part of Martin's presentation, was showing you how he incorporated Robert into the movie. Um, Martin wanted to prove how constraints can boost creativity. Now, in my opinion, this is what the TED Talk should be called. It should be called How Constraints Can Help Boost Creativity, because if Martin wouldn't have had these constraints, the movie probably would have been out in a year, maybe a year and a half. Probably wouldn't have had as much authenticity. Probably would have had more graphics, more stuff you don't really need in movies. And when people hear this story about how cheap the movie cost to, how cheap it was to make, people actually want to go see it to see if he had a little bit more money, would he be better at it? And this will help him in the future, because studios will see this and say, hey, if I need to make a movie on a low budget, this is the guy that we need to go to. If money's an issue, maybe the studio would hire him to do the whole project, take one of his books, make it into a movie. So it actually helped his career out by going through this whole process. And that's the main part of this presentation. And I noticed throughout his presentation, he only used one slide that had information on it. Other slides just had small little things on it, pictures, small words, small points he was making. But one slide of information, and he was just using that as an example. Martin, a huge part of the movie was a dream that Martin had, was to make a couple scenes, and where they're playing music, and and the instruments were made in the shape of women's body parts, and that's how the Cirque du Soleil came in. He went and asked the general manager of Cirque du Soleil if he could make these for him. The guy was so motivated, so inspired by this situation, where he agreed to do it for free. So he not only got the general manager of Cirque du Soleil to make these musical instruments, which is a huge part of the movie, he got his mentor Robert to come and shoot these scenes for free, which is impossible. That's how he was able to do it on such a short budget. Two ways how he communicated clearly with his audience is he showed clips of his movie, shows how he incorporated Robert, the green screens, how he photoshopped it in. Um, he proved how constraints can help boost creativity. That's huge. Like I said, that's what this TED Talk should be titled. When your back's against the wall, you don't really have a deadline, but you have a limited amount of funds. You have to stretch it out as much as you can. You have to hire people who's not really worried about the money, who will get paid later. You have to take on a lot of tasks yourself. I mean, this guy produced the movie, he wrote it, he starred in it. He did so many different things himself that if he was to try to pay other people, it would be millions. So that's one of the two ways how he communicated clearly. I mean, he made eye contact with his audience. He made jokes. He made the audience empathetic. When he told a story about him as a child reading comic books and him dreaming about what the future would look like. It connected with me. I used to read comic books as a child, so that's how that connected with me. And that's my TED Talk discussion. Thank you.